Lee Trevino is 86 years old, 6 major championships, one of the greatest ball strikers who ever lived, and the funniest man golf has ever known. But behind the jokes and that famous grin was a life so hard, so marked by poverty, near death and betrayal, that the truth is almost impossible to believe. What really happened to him is heartbreaking. Here's the full story. To understand the tragedy of Lee Trevino, you cannot start with the trophies. You have to start with the dirt floor. Because Lee Trevino was born on December 1, 1939, in Dallas, Texas, into a poverty so deep that most people today cannot even imagine it. He came into the world in a tiny wooden shack, with no electricity, no plumbing, and no running water. The floors were dirt, the walls were thin, and the home sat at the edge of a hayfield behind a country club, close enough that a poor Mexican-American boy could see a world of wealth he was never supposed to be part of. He never knew his father. The man was simply gone, absent from the very beginning, leaving no trace and no memory. Lee was raised by his mother, who cleaned houses for a living, and by his grandfather Joe, an immigrant from Mexico who dug graves for a paycheck. There was no money, there was no safety net, there was only work. And so Lee Trevino went to work as a small child, laboring in the cotton fields of Texas when he was as young as 5 years old, his hands in the dirt before most kids have learned to read. School never had a chance. Trevino dropped out in the 7th grade, around the age of 14, because survival mattered more than education. There was no path laid out for him, no mentor, no plan. What there was, just a few hundred yards from that shack, was a golf course. And a hungry kid with nothing to lose found his way onto it, first hunting for lost balls to sell, then caddying, then sneaking in shots whenever he could. He built his game with homemade clubs and a swing that no instructor would ever have taught, a strange flat move that aimed left and faded the ball, born entirely out of necessity and repetition. He once said there is no such thing as a natural touch. That touch is something you create by hitting millions of golf balls. He knew, because he had hit every one of those balls himself, alone, with nobody watching. At 17, he joined the United States Marine Corps. He served 4 years as a machine gunner in the 3rd Marine Division, and when he came out, he went back to the only thing he knew: golf, grinding as a club professional and hustling money games against anyone foolish enough to bet against the smiling Mexican kid with the ugly swing. He did not even earn his PGA Tour card until he was 26. He did not win on tour until he was 28. By the standards of professional golf, he was ancient before he ever truly began. And then, against every odd that had ever been stacked against him, he became one of the greatest players the sport has ever seen. In 1968, he won the US Open, his first major. Then came 1971, the year that defined him, a stretch so dominant it still sounds made up. In the span of just a few weeks, Trevino won the US Open, beating the great Jack Nicklaus in an 18-hole playoff, then the Canadian Open, and then the Open Championship, 3 national titles in roughly 20 days. He won 6 majors in total, 2 US Opens, 2 Open Championships, and 2 PGA Championships, and 29 PGA Tour titles. The dirt floor kid who started in a cotton field had climbed all the way to the very top of the world. They called him the Merry Mex, the man who never stopped talking, never stopped joking, the most beloved entertainer the galleries had. And then, at the absolute peak of all of it, the sky tried to kill him. Quick pause. If Lee Trevino's story inspires you, if you believe he is one of the toughest human beings golf has ever produced, type Supermex in the comments. If you grew up watching him and his laugh, type legend. I read every single one. It was June 27, 1975, at the Western Open at Butler National Golf Club near Chicago. A storm was rolling in, and play was suspended. Trevino, standing near the 13th hole, alongside fellow pros Jerry Hurd and Bobby Nichols, had just marked his ball about 3 feet from the cup. He thought the skies were about to clear. He decided not to run for shelter. It was the decision that nearly ended his life. A bolt of lightning came down, bounced off a nearby lake, and struck all 3 men where they sat. Trevino described it later in chilling detail. He said it was strangely comfortable at first, a very quiet sensation, a whining in his ears, and then his whole body began to shake as the current took hold of him. And in that moment, he said, his entire life truly did flash before his eyes. He thought about his wife, he thought about his family, and then everything went black. The lightning passed right through his body and left 4 burn marks behind. The electrical shock destroyed his muscle tone and did catastrophic damage to his spine. In typical Trevino fashion, even staring death in the face, he later joked that his first thought when he came to was, "This is a Helluva penalty for slow play." But the joke hid a brutal reality. The strike had broken something in him that would never fully heal. He underwent back surgery the following year to remove a damaged disc, and he endured months of grueling rehabilitation just to be able to swing a club again. Here is the part that makes it a genuine tragedy. Lee Trevino was never the same. He was 35 years old, in the prime of his career, one of the 2 or 3 best players on the planet, and the lightning stole the back he needed to stay there. The chronic pain became a permanent companion. He had to completely rebuild his swing around an injured spine, changing his stance and his aim just to function. Victories still came, but they no longer came easily, and everyone who watched him knew that the freewheeling, fearless ball striker of the early 1970s had been quietly diminished by something he never saw coming and could never get back. We will never know how many more majors Lee Trevino would have won if that storm had cleared 5 minutes sooner. But the heartbreak in his life did not begin and end on a golf course. Off it, the very wealth he had clawed his way out of poverty to earn was slipping through his fingers. Having grown up with nothing, having never been taught how money worked, Trevino trusted the wrong people. Throughout the 1970s, he lost millions of dollars to ill-advised investments and financial decisions made on his behalf. The savings of a once-in-a-generation talent drained away by mismanagement and misplaced trust. The man who had escaped the cotton fields found that escaping poverty and keeping the money were 2 very different battles, and the betrayal of being taken advantage of cut deep for someone who had earned every cent the hard way. And then there was the quietest tragedy of all, the one Trevino rarely joked about. His relentless drive, the same obsessive dedication that pulled him out of that shack, came at an enormous personal price. His passion for golf, the endless travel, the years on the road, cost him a marriage and left him out of touch with his own children for long stretches of his life. The father he never had as a boy, and the family he struggled to fully be present for as a man, became a wound that ran through generations. He was married 3 times, and is the father of 6 children. The laughter that made the whole world love him was in some ways a mask, hiding a man who had been alone since the very beginning, and who paid for his greatness with the relationships that mattered most. That is the real story behind the grin. A boy who started life on a dirt floor with no father, no money, and no education. A man who built a Hall of Fame career out of nothing but homemade clubs and stubborn will. A champion who was struck by lightning at the height of his powers and was never physically whole again. A millionaire who watched his fortune get drained away by people he trusted. And a father whose devotion to his craft left him estranged from the family he loved. The Merry Mex made the world laugh for 50 years, and almost no one ever stopped to ask what all that laughter was covering up. Today, Lee Trevino is 86 years old, living in Dallas with his wife Claudia, not far from where it all began. He still appears in public, still cracks jokes, still carries that unmistakable spark, recently sitting down to share his memories of the game he conquered against impossible odds. He is, remarkably, still here, still standing, still himself, and in a sport that has lost so many of its legends, that alone is something to be grateful for. But the tragedy of Lee Trevino is not that his life ended badly, because it did not. The tragedy is everything he had to survive to get here. Most people are handed one hardship in a lifetime, and it defines them. Trevino was handed crushing poverty, an absent father, a near-fatal lightning strike, financial betrayal, and personal loss, and he carried all of it behind a smile, so warm that the world only ever saw the joke. That is the heartbreaking part. The funniest man in golf was also one of the most wounded, and he spent a lifetime making sure we laughed instead of cried for him. He once said there is nothing he is scared of, because he has been hit by lightning and survived 4 years in the Marines. Coming from anyone else, it would sound like bravado. Coming from Lee Trevino, it is simply the truth of a man who has already faced down the worst that life could throw and walked away laughing. If this one moved you, drop a like before you scroll away. It is the single biggest thing that tells the algorithm to push these stories to other golf fans who might never see them otherwise. And subscribe if you want more of these, the kind that take the long view instead of the loud one. There are more coming.